Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice, no sugarcoating, no platitudes, no bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating the same old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Hello, listeners. This is an episode that I recorded back in January or February, and it has gone through many revisions because it was too teachy, and I think it was better if with some lived experience. So, final version, hopefully today, take 3. Today I wanted to talk about boundaries, and rather than just giving you the same regurgitated content that you could find anywhere on Instagram and TikTok, I guess a Naples integrated recovery spin-off on boundaries, because a lot of people don't understand boundaries. They understand cutoffs, they understand blocking, they understand making an announcement and then disappearing or just ghosting and calling it healing. We have a whole generation of people that see one post that they disagree with, a friend that they've been friends with for 20 years, and then because they didn't like the post, they immediately decide that this relationship is unsafe, toxic, narcissistic, violating, or beneath them. And people just start hard cutting each other off. My dad was particularly bad about this. I mean, he didn't have a ton of friends in real life, but any of the friends that he did have from his work career or from years ago, he unfriended everybody over politics because of social media posts. I could do a whole nother topic about that, about why probably you and your political opinions might be alienating or limiting your circle. But today I'm going to focus on boundaries. Another thing I wanted to touch on in this intro is I hear a lot of people say they didn't respect my boundaries. But the cleaner truth is that the boundary belongs to the person who is setting it. So a boundary is what I do with my access, my time, my energy, my attention, my body, my phone, my expectations, my participation, because I can't change anybody or make anybody do anything. So it is a structure that I uphold. They are the lines around who gets access to me, and it's about how I decide with whom and with what I will engage, what I will step back from, and what I am not going to participate in or what I am not going to feed. So once you understand that the boundary is actually for you, not for the other person, then you stop waiting for people to magically become more respectful before you change your own behavior. Now I'm going to tell a long-winded story that hopefully illustrates the different levels of boundary access, I suppose. And the reason for this is because something else that I see is that clients often will say something like, he didn't respect my boundaries, and then they jump into hard cutoff, block, delete, no contact, I'm protecting my peace, burn the bridge, salt the earth, change the locks, and sometimes you really do have to do that. I'm not even making a case that some people are not harmful or manipulative or trying to pull you into their addiction chaos abyss, or if there's repeated violence, threats, exploitation, cruelty, all of those things unquestionably do require serious distance and probably blocking. But today I'm going to talk about a different skill that comes before that hard cutoff. And for a lot of adult relationships, it is the more first honest move, and I would call this reclassification. Some relationships need a demotion before they need a deletion, and sometimes that demotion will show you in time that perhaps the deletion is necessary. But I'm going to offer this story and why you should probably go through phases before this full hard cutoff. Today I'm going to focus on reclassification, and that means that I stop giving somebody a role that they have not earned, or I stop pretending that this person should be in my inner circle when their behavior shows me you only have outer circle capacity. That means I stop expecting consistency from someone whose pattern is inconsistency, or I stop organizing disappointment around somebody that I hoped that you were, and instead I just respond to who you repeatedly show me that you actually are. And so I really had to learn this lesson through a friendship that really irritated and hurt me. And another mutual friend, anytime that I would talk about this, kept saying back to me like, "Oh my God, are you still on this? Are you still upset about this?" And that's why I think this story fits, or why it's a good example of how I think that you should reclassify friendships. So a few years ago, I made a friend. His info was passed on to me by another person that is kind of in the industry. He's like a relationship coach, and he said, "Man, I met this guy one time, and I don't think that he really needs to be a client. I think he just really needs friends. He doesn't really have any supports. He doesn't have any friends. He's a nice guy. Like, here's his phone number." And I keep a pretty intentionally small circle. I mean, I know a lot of people, and I am friendly with a lot of people, but I don't have a lot of close friends, which I think that's wisdom. But so this guy was a gay guy who said he was looking to make friends, that he didn't really, he didn't fit in with gay hookup culture. He didn't like the gay nightlife scene. He didn't drink alcohol. He had come out of a bad relationship with someone who had addiction issues. He said that he was religious or spiritual, and he was just looking for some healthy friends to get on his feet. And so I was like, I think that this would be someone that is a good fit, because that's how my partner and I are. We don't drink. We don't go out, have a ton of nightlife stuff. I mean, going to dinner at like 7 o'clock, that's a late night for me. So I'm trying to meet somebody for friendship and community or some similar interests. And I was interested in this possibility of a kind of friendship with another gay guy that was not focused on the same shallow, alcohol-centered, hookup adjacent mess of like gay people that I have met. Of course, I know I'm generalizing. I'm not saying all gay people are like that, but a lot of them are. And so he seemed to represent something that I wanted in my life, which was like friendship, where there would be some boundaries and spiritual overlap, addiction awareness, healthy connection, some sense of chosen family. And I think that here is where I misclassified him, is that I gave the possibility of too much value too quickly, because in the first day that we hung out, he kind of shared some vulnerable stuff about his life and some of what he had been through. And I remember reading that as sincerity, that I just thought that he was just a nice guy, open, kind of soft around the edges, that made me think that there was more emotional depth than maybe there had actually been. And looking back, I can see now that I think my brain probably took some of that early vulnerability and then treated it as evidence of emotional maturity. And those are different things. Because someone can disclose some pain and still lack consistency, accountability, or the ability to be a reliable friend. But so I think that I had potentially given this friendship too much value too quickly, and treated a possible friend like evidence that something better existed. And that is how relational fantasy works. It grabs a few details of something and then it can fill in the rest, where someone says a few of the right things, says that they share some similar values, uses language that maybe you have been wanting to hear from another person, and then your mind can start to build a role for this person before they have even earned it. Someone's stated values are only a starting point. Their behavior is the evidence. So it did not take long in this friendship before there were tiny little tells. And I'm aware that some of this stuff sounds really nitpicky, like I'm just like a bitch to be a friend with. But like one example was there were a handful of times where we would make plans, let's say a dinner plan, that this friends group was going to go out to dinner, and people would be waiting like hours past the meet time. Everybody is hungry, everybody is waiting, and then this guy would like show up an hour or 2 hours later with some Starbucks and be like, oh, I'm not really hungry, I ate something already. And like that really irritates me. It's very inconsiderate. Like maybe that's like type A asshole, but if everybody has been waiting, or if everybody has organized the day around the plan, and then someone just kind of rolls in like it was a loose suggestion floating around in the air, that was information. So there were irritants like this that were not just one-offs. And sometimes I would say like, hey, like the plan was 6 o'clock. Like what the heck? And he's like, well, nobody said it like a plan or anything. And I would sometimes find myself screenshotting or showing him the text message like, this was the plan, it's right there. And then he'd be like, like, oh, blonde moment. And maybe it was, maybe not, I don't know. But so there were a handful of things like that where I let these things stack up. But at some point he had this injury to his foot. That's a pretty serious injury that it got cut like really badly. And with this, he ghosted the friend group for months. And I remember being really upset by that. And then, like a submarine, he like resurfaced months later after people had been like reaching out and everything. I mean, ghosted. And he then like resurfaces and he was like, oh, after that foot injury, I was in a deep depression. And I was like, man, like, so I understand depression, but the ghosting did not make sense. And so he used the fact that I'm a therapist, and he was like, well, you should understand more than anybody because you're a therapist. And that also kind of irritated me, as if my clinical capacity was a relational obligation. Now, first of all, another thing that maybe makes me a little bit different from some therapists, a diagnosis or a mental health condition, it can help explain circumstances, but it does not create a free pass for you. Could you imagine? So some people are looking for a diagnosis so that they can be like, but hey, I mean, I do that because of my autism. I'm not picking on autism, but like, I do that because I'm on the spectrum, or I do that because of whatever. Could you imagine if I was a fucked up disaster drinking a liter of vodka a day and just like out like punching a police horse in the face and like pissing myself and just doing anything I wanted to, and then I was like, but hey, I'm an alcoholic? Absolutely not. Accountability is a critical part of any kind of addiction and mental health work. A diagnosis or a presenting problem can explain the foundation, or it can explain circumstances, but it doesn't give you a free pass on behavior. So, I understand depression, isolation, shame, avoidance, injury, shutting down, but I also understand that friendship requires contact, repair, accountability, and basic respect. So understanding that somebody has depression, that does not erase impact of behavior. So again, this was like more information. So this friendship, the group kind of, got back together again after he decided he, was going to surface again. And there was still some humor. It was kind of like old times again, kind of. But it didn't take long, another few months, and then he got in a car crash. And with this car crash, of course, the first thing was like, "Are you okay? What do you need?" And almost immediately after that, a message, I'm paraphrasing, that said, basically, "You guys aren't going to see me or hear from me for a long time again." And I was fucking pissed, because now it had a rhythm. Something happens, you disappear, everybody is supposed to just like understand or be okay with this. And like, so I said, one of these friends was like, "Yeah, why does that bother you so much? Let him just do whatever he's gonna do." I guess people are different. Maybe you're okay with somebody who just kind of is in, out of your life. But if somebody just kind of is like a feral cat that just comes and goes and then like ghosts for months at a time, I don't think that this is someone that has inner circle access. And it leaves the rest of us to decide, do we like reach out or worry or manage, wait, interpret, pretend that this is normal behavior? So I said something to the extent of, "Hey man, you need to communicate if you need help. Like, people will help you with a ride. If you need to get someplace, any of that stuff, but I'm not going to chase people to be my friend." And maybe this is something that I didn't need to say, because he received that as very harsh. And apparently some of the other guys in this friends group also read that as very harsh. But I'm looking at this, that this was a maturity issue. And with it, he deflected any kind of accountability. And he said, "It didn't make sense. I never asked for you to chase me." And that is technically true in the most annoying way. Right, you didn't ask me to chase you, but you created a relational structure where unless someone is chasing you, that's the only way to maintain any kind of relational contact. If you disappear, make some vague announcement about how nobody would ever hear from you, and then you're confused when someone names the burden then that like places on everybody else. I don't think that is harsh. But when somebody then says something like that, like, "I didn't ask you to chase me," it can make you start to question your own frustration. Am I overreacting? Is this about me? Am I like being a controlling friend? Am I coming in too hot because some old attachment stuff got touched? And probably to some extent, yes. Sometimes your nervous system is reacting to old material, like maybe old abandonment or an old friendship or an old relationship or something like that. But in this case, I think that there was also a real relational problem. Sure, I have my stuff, he has his stuff, both are present. But so about 3, maybe 4 months later, he surfaced again, and things were really different this time. And at some point, him and I had this conversation to try to find some sort of common ground or repair. And I just wanted him to own the impact of these disappearance episodes and how I thought that was really unreasonable for a close friend to do. And I wanted him to understand that disappearing and then like returning with no accountability, that's not healthy for a friendship. And it became very clear he was going to operate this way. And there was no accountability. And at some point I said something like, again, this is probably another thing that maybe I didn't need to announce, but at some point I said something like, I just imagine that our friendship is probably going to change. And I didn't hate him. I wasn't saying that I needed some dramatic friendship funeral. I guess I was verbalizing my thinking process. I need to stop investing in this friendship the same way because this is just how you are. And that is a boundary reclassification. A relationship can move from inner circle to outer circle. It can move from I share my emotional life and my inner material to you're somebody that I send memes to. And it can move you from expecting consistency and effort from you to I just accept that you are unreliable and I plan accordingly. And it can move you from you are chosen family to this is somebody that I know. And that can be painful when you saw the possibility of more, but it's also cleaner than pretending. So maybe that's all that he was meant to ever be, was just a casual friend. And instead I was like turning him into evidence that something better existed. The disappointment was real because I had given him a role that belonged to hope, a category, a hunger for healthier friendships, and some old frustration with like a gay male social life. And he didn't earn that role, and I assigned it too early, and that's my shit and my problem. But after this conversation, I didn't really interact with him a ton, mostly because of him. Because I would still like send some occasional memes if I would see like, dumb blonde or, silly bottom stuff. I would send him a meme, I would message, I would check in. I'd let him know that I was thinking about him or whatever, or something made me think of him. And he was very dismissive. Maybe occasionally there'd be like a heart back on something or like a thumbs up, which I... generationally. Now, if my mom sends a thumbs up, that really means like, oh yeah, thumbs up. But for someone that's like 28 years old, thumbs up usually doesn't mean, yay, good job, thumbs up. It usually means like, yeah, I saw it, bro. Nice. And there was no meaningful interaction, but then I noticed. Now, first of all, recently, I've deactivated my personal accounts, which has actually been very liberating. I could maybe do an episode later on that. But I am not like a compulsive like checker going down the list of which friends interacted with or saw whatever story. But I noticed I started doing that with this guy. And something else that I noticed that really kind of hurt me was that I saw he was having a lot of meaningful interaction with my partner and with our mutual friends. Now, this isn't like a jealousy, like, oh, you want my boyfriend thing, but this was showing me you have energy for other people who are also close to me. You've got signs of life for interaction with them, but not for me. For me, just this cold thumbs up. So, message received. And at that point, I blocked him. Now, my friends told me that that was very immature. I was working with a therapist. I'm going to bitch about that motherfucker too in an episode coming up. But the therapist that I was working with also was like, no, I don't yeah, that was kind of immature that you blocked him. Like, don't you see that you checking the behavior or that you checking for likes, that was the toxic thing for you? The boundary was for me. the block was for me, because if I'm doing something that's unhealthy, if I'm looking at analytics to see if you're interacting with me, probably I need some serious distance from this friendship or from this relationship. So that's the part that matters clinically, was that at some point I had given this friendship a quote unquote demotion. So like, why was I still angry? Because by words I had reclassified him, but my behavior had not caught up. Part of me was still checking to see if this friendship still mattered to him too. So I had demoted him in my head, but my behavior was like leaving a little bit of relational fishing line in the water, and that mismatch created resentment. Now, I'm going to disagree with AA here, and I'm going to tell you that resentment is not the thing that kills you. Resentment can be boundary data. It can tell you that behavior and internal truth have fallen out of alignment. And I was telling myself that I had reclassified this friendship, but I was looking for signs of mutuality with somebody who had already shown me the limits of what he was willing to offer or had the capacity to offer. And that is where a demotion can also show you that deletion is also necessary. In some situations, a person can stay in your life with less access. Sometimes even the lower access version can keep you hooked, resentful, checking, comparing, or abandoning yourself. And at that point, the issue becomes what that continued access is costing you. So I did block. And then this friend eventually found out that I blocked him. Still, accountability zero. Now he's saying things to like the friends group or to my partner like, I don't know what I did. I'm just so confused. I was really frustrated. Now, I think the second arrow concept fits here when we start adding in additional layers of meaning making. So I started filling in a lot of shit in my head that was not helpful. This guy is just like every other gay guy I've met. He is a flake. He is just obsessed with his appearance. He is emotionally unavailable, or he has poor emotional maturity. All gay people are this way. Yeah. And then additional layers of like cruelty even started to come in, which you ever get so pissed off at a situation that then you start like adding in mean stuff that you don't even want to think, but it's just like a way that your brain tries to protect you by like becoming more enraged? That started happening too. But having a thought and acting on it are two different things. So now this is several years later. He is definitely not the person that I thought. So perhaps that non-friendship is exactly what it needs to be. And yeah, I think to this day, so there's been a handful of interactions still with my partner or whatever, where I see little flare-ups of, even though I am not even still friends with this guy, I'm still occasionally impacted by his poor emotional immaturity. And guess what? This performative version of him that existed when I met him, no. He drinks, he hooks up, he has the performative identity of somebody looking for healthy connection, and then the behavior is something else. And that left a really shitty aftertaste, because I thought that I had found a different type of When disappointment hits an old wound, it does not stay proportional. It recruits every other disappointment that can look similar. So now suddenly I'm dealing with a whole category of people, a whole history, and a whole file folder of old evidence. And that is where doing the work is real, because he is responsible for his life and his behavior, but I'm responsible for what I built around the idea of who I thought that he was. So this is the piece that I want you to look at in your own life. Who has access to you that no longer matches the evidence? Who still gets emotional information that maybe they have not handled well? Or who still gets your time even though their behavior shows that they disrespect it? Who is still getting your planning energy when they are unreliable? Who gets your crisis level concern when they disappear and then they return with no accountability or something similar to that? Who is getting your inner circle expectations when their behavior shows you that they are only an outer circle capacity person or a meme-only friendship? A boundary is what you do with access, attention, time, body, energy, phone, feed, and expectations. And it becomes real, though, with your follow-through, because if I say that a friendship is downgraded and that I'm scanning for proof that it matters, I'm still hooked. And if I say I'm not going to chase you, and then I have bait in the water hoping for meaningful engagement when you've already shown me you don't give a fuck, I'm chasing. And if I say that I'm going to accept someone's limitations and then resent them for being limited, then I'm bargaining with reality. Reclassification is practical because if a person is unreliable, stop making plans with them that depend on their reliability. This person cannot handle emotional accountability, so don't bring vulnerable material to them. If a person is just fun, or if they're just a fuckboy, then just see them as a fun fuckboy. There are usually 3 adult options for relationships. You can accept it, work toward change, or leave it. And acceptance means I see this person as they are, and I adjust my expectations accordingly. Working toward change means I have an uncomfortable conversation, I ask them for behavior change, and watch what happens. And leaving means I remove access without needing to build a court case proving to everybody that they are terrible. The most miserable place is if you are hovering between all 3, and that's where I think I was for a while, because I was trying to have some level of acceptance. I was trying to work towards some level of change. I'm sending memes, I'm checking in, and the evidence continued, so then I had to leave this interaction with the blocking. Now, that therapist that I was working with said, why don't you just, why block? Why do you have to be so dramatic? Well, I would argue, why do I want a lurker attached to my material? If we're not close, or if we're not friends, or if we're not interacting, what are we doing, pretending that this exists when it really doesn't? So there didn't need to be a scorched earth last final argument, no dramatic text, just block and done. That's not always the ending. A lot of relationships can survive the reclassification just fine. There was another girl that I worked with that her and I were really, really close several years ago. And then she got in a relationship, as did I, at around the same time. And it went from being super close to just never talking at all. And I think that's a perfect example of, well, there was some distance between, actual physical distance that we didn't work together anymore, but also just that, that's a reclassification that doesn't have to be personal. So you don't just block everybody. A friend can become a casual friend. Maybe a family member has to become a holiday-only person that you encounter. And a old close friend could potentially be somebody that you only care about from a distance. A coworker can just be a coworker without it being anything personal. A partner can be asked for a specific change and sometimes actually meet you there. And sometimes with friendships, if there is a demotion, it might show you that keeping any version of the friendship still activates too much inside of you, leaving you too resentful or too hooked or too self-betraying. And in that case, then maybe the deletion or the blocking is what you need to do. The real work, I think, in all of this is learning to use evidence earlier. So I had an episode a few weeks ago where I talked about how often in relationships we see red flags. I've got this meme of a guy that's wearing a scarf that's red, and it says, "I knitted a scarf out of all the red flags." Boy, I've been there. The work is seeing the evidence earlier. The lateness when we all had a plan was evidence. Ghosting, evidence. The "you're a therapist, you should understand or co-sign my bullshit," evidence. Car crash announcement and I'm about to ghost everybody again, evidence. Deflection, evidence. Lack of meaningful interaction with me while interacting with my partner or our friends, evidence. All of those things are the flags. Are you seeing any of this and doing anything with this, or are you going to wait until it's really painful? So the problem was I kept negotiating with the evidence that was right in my face because a part of me still felt hooked or liked what this friendship I thought had represented. And that's where a lot of us get stuck, is that we keep relating to a version of a person that we hoped that they were. We keep talking to potential, or we keep investing in the opening scene instead of the full pattern of what they are really like. And then we call it loyalty when really it's just self-abandonment. So, that's not patience if you are avoiding reality. A person can matter and still have less access or no access. And a person can still have good qualities. Because, as much as I've, shit on this guy, I think he's probably got some good redeemable qualities. But unreliable, not somebody that I want to be close with. A person can be struggling, still be accountable for how they treat other people. A person can have real pain and still be too immature for the role that you gave them. And a person can be a part of your life without being central to your life. That's the skill. You don't have to make somebody a monster in order to step back. You don't have to wait until you are as upset and hurt as I was until you lower access. You don't need to justify your boundaries with courtroom prosecution. That's another thing, is I have one mutual friend who's still very close with this guy, and I felt like I had to explain myself a dozen times. And why am I doing that? You're obviously not going to see it the same way that I do, and I guess that's fine, and it's okay to be misunderstood. So this is a situation where maybe someone should have been a casual friend, and my shit or my part in this was turning him into evidence that something better existed. His behavior is on him. My overinvestment was on me. His lack of accountability on him. My anger, mine to understand. His dismissiveness, his to own. And what I do with that data, that's my task. Clean responsibility, no being a martyr, no courtroom, no 20-page prosecution in my head, just reality. This is what happened. This is what you showed me. This is what I need to do with access to me now. So some relationships need a demotion before they need a deletion, and sometimes that demotion will show you that the deletion is still necessary. So that is not being bitter. I think that that's just having clarity of not giving front row access to people who have shown you that they cannot handle that seat. Stop turning people into proof of what you were hoping that they would be. Stop checking for mutuality with people who are just giving you absence. Watch the evidence, reclassify accurately, follow through with what you say you're going to do with that access. That is boundaries with the spine. It is painful work, and that it's doing the work. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to people around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we're all capable of growing past that. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next one.